The man in bed 9 had not spoken a full sentence in 3 weeks, and that morning he held the small paper crane up to the window light and started to cry. He was 81 years old, and the nurses had stopped expecting much from him. He ate when they fed him. He turned his face to the wall when they changed the bandages on his leg. His chart said the word that charts use when a body is closing a door it does not intend to open again, and everyone on the 4th floor had read that chart. So when Renee came through on her cleaning round near the end of the night, pushing her cart of cloths and spray bottles and the soft grey bin for the trash, she had no plan beyond what she did every night, which was to leave a folded paper crane on the windowsill of every patient in the ward. She had been doing it for almost a year by then, 341 nights. Give or take the ones she missed for her own daughter's fever, and the 2 days the bus did not run in the ice. A crane, a bed, every night. She never signed them. She never said a word about them. She set each one down on the sill where the morning would find it and moved on with her cart. And most mornings nobody ever knew who had left the small, bright bird on the ledge while they slept. She had no idea that the man in bed 9 had spent 40 years of his life teaching the very thing her hands did without thinking. She did not know his name was anything more than the name on the door. And he, lying there with the crane trembling in his fingers, did not yet know that the woman who had left it was about to walk back into the room. Stay with me, because this one is worth the whole way through. Renee Carter was 34, and she cleaned the oncology and long-term floors of Mercy General on the overnight shift, 11 at night to 7 in the morning, 4 nights on and 3 off when the schedule was kind, which it mostly was not. She had a daughter named Aviana who was 9 and slept at her sister's apartment across town on the nights Renee worked. She had a mop closet she knew better than she knew most rooms in her own life. She had a back that ached low and constant, and a pair of shoes she had resoled twice, because new ones cost $40 and $40 was the gas bill. She had, in short, the life of a woman the world is built to walk past, and she had learned a long time ago not to take that personally. The cranes had started with grief, the way a lot of small good things do. A year before, almost to the week, there had been a girl in bed, 4 on the children's overflow wing, 12 years old, in and out of treatment for most of a year, and Renee had cleaned that room every night and watched the girl get smaller and quieter. One night the girl was awake when Renee came in, and she asked, in the flat, tired voice of a child who has learned to ask for very little, whether Renee knew how to make anything out of paper. Renee did not. She had never folded anything in her life that was not a fitted sheet. Even so, she went home that morning and she sat at her sister's kitchen table with a printed flyer from the break room and a video on her cracked phone, and she folded and unfolded and crushed and started over until her fingers learned the shape, and the next night she set a lopsided crane on the girl's tray. The girl turned it over in her hands like it was made of something rare. Her name was Imani, and she was 12, and she had been in and out of that wing so long that she knew the names of the night nurses and which vending machine 8 quarters and which window in the family room would not lock. She held the crooked little bird up to the lamp and studied the fold on its wing for a long time, and then she said that her grandmother used to tell her that if you folded 1,000 of them, you could have 1 wish. She said it the way you say a thing you have decided not to believe in, because believing in it costs too much. Renee did not promise her 1,000. She did not promise her anything because she had learned that promises were a kind of money she did not have to spend. She just said she would bring one a night. The girl asked her if she meant it. Renee said she did. The girl set the crane on her tray table, square in the middle where she could see it from the bed, and she said, "All right then," and she turned off her own lamp, which was a thing she did not usually do before the nurses made her, and she went to sleep. So Renee brought one a night. She got better at them. By the 2nd week, the wings came out even and the heads sat sharp, and Imani started lining them up along the rail of her bed, a row of them, all colours, whatever paper Renee could find in the recycling by the printers. The girl named some of them. She gave one a long story about being a Dr. Crane, who was very tired of the hospital and wanted to go to the beach, and Renee, wiping down the sink, said she knew exactly how that crane felt, and the girl laughed. A real one, the first Renee had heard out of her. There were 19 of them on the rail by the end. And on the 20th night the bed was empty and stripped and waiting for the next child, and the row of cranes was gone, packed away by someone, or thrown out by someone. And Renee stood in the doorway with a fresh crane in her hand and nowhere to put it. So she put it on the next windowsill. And the one after that. And by the end of that week, she was leaving one on every sill on the floor because she could not save anyone and she knew it. But she could leave a small bright thing where a frightened person would find it in the morning and know, without being told, that someone had been there in the dark and had thought of them. That was all it ever was. She never expected it to come back to her. People who have learned not to take the world's indifference personally also learn not to expect the world to notice when they are kind. What she did not know was that one of the beds she folded for held a man who had spent his whole working life teaching 10,000 hands to make the exact bird she was leaving on his sill. His name was Walter Okafor, and once he had been someone. Not famous, not the way the word is usually meant, yet in the small, precise world of people who care about folded paper, Walter Okafor had been a kind of quiet giant. He had come to the city at 22 with $11 and a suitcase, and he had spent 4 decades teaching art in a public school on the east side, the kind of school where the supply budget ran out by October and a teacher who wanted his students to make anything had to make it out of whatever the world threw away. Paper was free. The recycling bins behind the print shop on the corner were free. So Walter taught paper. And somewhere in those decades he had started a free Saturday class in a church basement 2 blocks from the school where any child who showed up could learn to fold. No permission slip, no fee, no questions about who their people were or whether they had any. He kept a coffee can of dimes by the door for the bus fare home of any kid who had walked there and could not walk back. He taught the crane first, always the crane, because the crane was patient and forgiving, and taught the hands to trust a process they could not yet see the end of. He used to tell them that a person who could fold a crane could fold a life, that you started with something flat and ordinary, and you made the same honest creases over and over until a thing with wings stood up in your hand. Thousands of children passed through that basement over 40 years. Some of them grew up and taught their own children. One of them grew up and built a foundation in his name that he was too modest to ever fully look at. Walter had buried his wife 4 years back. Her name was Adaze, and she had sat in the back of that basement every Saturday for 30 years with a thermos of tea, sorting the donated paper by colour so the children would have something bright. And when she died, the Saturdays stopped, because Walter could not stand in that room without her sorting the paper behind him. He had no children of his own. The leg that was failing him now had been failing for a while, a circulation thing that the doctor spoke about in careful diminishing terms. And he had come into Mercy General in the late summer, expecting, with the clear-eyed calm of a man who had made his peace, that he would not come back out. He had stopped talking, not because he could not, but because he could not find anything left that he wanted to say. He turned to the wall. He let the days move past him like water past a stone. And every morning for the weeks he had been there, he woke to find a paper crane on his windowsill. He had not made anything of it at first. The mind in that state does not make much of anything. A crane on the sill. The nurses, he assumed, or a volunteer, some hospital program, a printed kindness from a committee. He let it sit. Then the cranes kept coming, one a morning, and they were not all the same. Some mornings the bird sat proud and sharp. Some mornings it leaned a little crushed on one wing, folded by tired hands, in a hurry. And it was the crooked ones, strangely, that began to reach him, because a machine does not fold a crooked crane, and the committee does not fold 300 of them by hand in the dark. Somewhere in this building a person was doing this. One person. Every night. He started, without quite deciding, to keep them. The night nurse, a young woman named Tasha, who had worked the floor for 3 years and had a soft spot for the quiet ones, noticed the small flock gathering on his nightstand. 11 of them, then 14, lined up along the laminate in a careful row. He had arranged himself with hands that shook. She did not say anything about it at first. She just started setting his water where it would not knock them over, and once, finding one that had drifted to the floor, she picked it up and set it back in line with the others, careful to put it where it had been, because she could tell from the way they were arranged that the order mattered to him, even if she did not know why. It was Tasha, near the end of that long autumn, who said the thing that started everything moving. She was checking his line one night, the cranes in their row, catching the blue of the monitor light, and she said, half to herself, that whoever was leaving them sure had steady hands once upon a time, because the folds were textbook. She was not really expecting an answer. She had stopped expecting answers from bed 9 weeks ago, the way the whole floor had. And Walter, who had not strung 6 words together in days, turned his head on the pillow and asked her, in a voice rusted from disuse, what she had just said. Tasha, startled to hear him speak at all, nearly dropped the tubing. She recovered and repeated it. The folds were good, she said, real good. Like somebody had been taught right, or had taught a lot of other people right, one or the other. Walter looked at the crane nearest his hand for a long moment, turning it to quarter turn with one finger so the lamplight caught the wing. Then he asked her if she knew who left them. She did not. Nobody did, she told him. They just showed up. The morning girls thought it was the overnight cleaner, but nobody had ever caught her at it, and the woman never said, so it had become one of those things the floor just had, like the broken ice machine and the window in the family room that would not lock. A small mystery everyone had stopped trying to solve. Walter asked her to find out. It was not a small thing for him to ask for something. Tasha understood that, even if she could not have said why. A man who had asked for nothing for weeks, who had turned his food and his face and his whole self toward the wall, was asking for something. So she said she would try. What neither of them knew yet was how close the answer already was. 3 rooms down, kneeling to wipe the baseboard under a bed that had been empty since Tuesday. Renee almost did not work that week at all. The math had gone bad again. Aviana had outgrown her shoes and needed new ones for the school program, the good kind that the program required, and the brake light on the car her sister lent her had thrown a code that turned into a number Renee could not look at directly. She had picked up 2 extra shifts to cover it, and her body was paying the interest. She had thought more than once that week, dragging her cart down the long blue hall at 4 in the morning, about whether the cranes were worth the extra 90 seconds a room, when 90 seconds a room across a 40-bed floor was an hour she did not have. She thought about stopping. He was so tired that stopping felt almost like wisdom. She did not stop. She told herself it was habit. It was not habit. It was the girl in bed 4, still, after all these months, and the way the girl had turned that first crooked bird over in her hands. Some debts you pay to people who will never know you, paid them. So, on the night that Tasha had promised Walter she would find the answer, Renee came through near the end of her round, pushing into the dark of bed 9 with her cart, expecting the sleeping shape she had wiped and folded around for 3 weeks. And the lamp was on, and the man was awake, and he was sitting up against the pillows with a row of paper cranes lined up on the table in front of him, and he was looking at the doorway like he had been waiting for it to open for a very long time. Renee stopped with her hand on the cart. She thought, in the reflexive way of someone whose job is to be unseen, that she had done something wrong, that she had woken him, that there would be a complaint. She started to apologize. Walter lifted his hand off the blanket slow, and he did not look at her face first. He looked at her hands. He asked her, quiet, if she was the one. Renee did not understand the question. She said she was just there to clean, that she would come back, that she was sorry to wake him. He shook his head. He picked up the crane nearest him, the one from that very morning, a little crushed on the left wing, because her thumb had been cold, and he held it up between them in the lamplight so they could both see it. This one, he said. You made this one. And Renee, who had left more than 300 of these on more than 300 sills, and had never once been asked about a single one, felt something go very still in her chest. She said, yes. She said she hoped it was all right. She had not meant anything by it. She just left them. Walter Okafor began very quietly to cry. It was not a small thing she had walked into. She would understand that only later. For now she only knew that an old man she did not know was weeping over a paper bird she had folded with cold hands at the end of a shift, and that some line she did not understand had just been crossed, and that she should probably go get the nurse. She took a step back toward the hall. He asked her, through it, not to go. "Please," he said, "just a minute." So she stayed, he told her, in pieces, with long stops to gather himself who he had been. The basement, the Saturday class. The crane he taught first, always first, for 40 years. Because the crane teaches the hands to trust. He told her he had not folded one in 2 years, since his wife, since the leg, since he had decided quietly that he was done. He had come here to be done. And every morning for 3 weeks he had woken to find that someone in this building, someone he had never met, was leaving on his windowsill the exact thing he had given his whole life to. The thing he taught. The thing he thought he had finished with, it had come back to him in the dark, one bird a morning, folded by a stranger's tired hands, and he had not been able to make himself stop keeping them. He asked her where she had learned. Renee told him about the girl in bed 4, the flyer from the break room and the video, on her cracked phone and the kitchen table, at 6 in the morning. She told him she was not good at it, that she only knew the one, that she had never learned any of the others. She said it almost as an apology, the way you apologize for a small gift in front of someone who knows what a real one looks like. Walter looked at her for a long moment, and something came back into his face that the nurses would not have recognized, because none of them had ever seen it there. He asked her if she would let him teach her another. It was almost dawn. Her cot was half a floor behind schedule. She had a supervisor who counted rooms and a body that was running on nothing, and a daughter's shoes she still did not know how she was buying. She set the brake on the cart. She pulled the chair to the side of the bed. She said, "All right." The flock on the windowsill became something else after that night, and so did Renee's life, though neither of them could have seen the shape of it yet from where they sat. He taught the frog first, because the frog made people laugh, and he wanted to give her something that made people laugh. His hands shook too badly now to make the sharp, final creases, so he talked her through them, slow, naming each fold the way he had named them for 40 years of children, and her hands, young and strong and quick to learn, did what his could not any more. "Mountain fold," he would say. "Now valley. Now turn it over and trust me." And she would, and the shape would come. And the first time the little frog actually hopped when she pressed its back, she laughed out loud and then clapped a hand over her own mouth because it was 4 in the morning and the floor was sleeping. Walter laughed, too, a dry, rusty sound he had not used in a long time. And Tasha, passing in the hall, stopped and looked in the door and then kept walking with something soft on her face. Renee came early when she could. She stayed late when the floor was quiet. She would finish her round and leave her cart by the door and pull the chair to bed, 9, and the old man would talk her hands through a shape, and the grey hour before her shift ended stopped being the loneliest hour of her night and started being the one she worked toward. She learned the box, and she kept a small one on her cart for paper clips after that. She learned the 8-pointed star, which took her 4 nights and made her want to quit on the 3rd, and Walter would not let her quit, told her that the star was where most people gave up, and that the ones who did not give up at the star were the ones worth teaching. She learned a lily that fell apart twice before it held, and when it finally held, she sat very still, looking at it in her palm. And Walter watched her face and did not say anything because he knew what it was to make a thing hold that had fallen apart twice. And as her hands filled something in him that had turned to the wall, turned slowly back to the room. He ate, he asked, the day nurse questions about the weather and the news and whether the print shop on the corner was still there. He sat up, and then he sat up in the chair, and then he asked them to wheel the chair to the window so he could see the sky while he taught. Tasha, watching it happen across those weeks, did not understand the medicine of it and did not need to. She just stopped setting his water so carefully because his own hands had steadied enough to do it, and one night she caught herself smiling at the row of cranes on the sill and had to go stand the supply closet for a minute because she had been a nurse on that floor for 3 years and she had learned not to let herself hope for the quiet ones. And here was a quiet one teaching the overnight cleaner to fold a paper star at 4 in the morning, and it had undone something in her she had kept carefully tied. He asked her one night about the girl, the first one. Bed 4. What had happened to her? Renee told him the truth because he was the kind of man you told the truth to. The girl had not made it. 19 cranes and then an empty bed. She had never known the girl's last name. She had only known the small flat voice, asking if Renee knew how to make anything out of paper, and the way the girl had said her grandmother's thing about 1,000 and a wish like a story she had set down because it had gotten too heavy to carry. Walter was quiet a long time. Then he told her that the 1,000 was not really about the wish, that he had told that story to 40 years of children and watched too many of them put their hope in the number, and that what he had come to believe, after all of it, was that the 1,000 was never the point, the folding was the point. The hands learning to trust a process they could not yet see the end of. The patience the 1,000 was just what was left over. After a person had spent that long being patient and kind in 100 small, unwitnessed ways, you did not fold 1,000 cranes and earn a wish. You folded one a night for someone frightened, and one more, and one more, and one morning you looked up and your life had become something you would have wished for if you had known to ask. He said he thought she had folded more than 1,000 by now, without ever counting. Renee had not counted. She did the arithmetic later. Alone, on the bus, 340-some nights, 40 beds, most nights. She had folded tens of thousands. She had never made a single wish. And she sat with that on the cold bus in the dark and did not know yet what to do with it. What she did not know was that Walter had already started with the steadiest help he could find to make sure the world finally caught up to her. He could not do much from a hospital bed. He could, though, make a phone call, and he had one person left to call who would not let him down. 40 years before, in the church basement, a boy named Curtis Menzer had shown up every Saturday for 3 years, a quiet kid with quick hands and nothing much at home, and Walter had taught him the crane, and then everything after the crane, and Curtis had grown up and gone into the world and done very well. Well enough to have spent the last decade running the foundation that bore his old teacher's name, the one Walter never looked at, because it embarrassed him to be a building's worth of someone else's gratitude. The Okafor Fold, they called it. It put origami and art into hospital children's wards and underfunded schools across 3 states. It had a budget that would have stopped Renee's heart. And it had been started, every dollar of it, by a man who had learned at 6 years old in a basement that his hands could make something out of nothing. Walter called Curtis and told him he had found someone. He told him about the cranes on the sill. 341 nights. A crane, a bed, every night, folded by a hospital cleaner who had taught herself off a cracked phone for a dying child and never once signed her name. He told Curtis that in 40 years of teaching he had met a great many people with talent, and he could count on one hand the ones with the other thing, the thing the crane was really for, the patience and the faithfulness and the willingness to be kind when no one was watching. Watch. And he said that this woman, this Renee, had it, and that she was cleaning floors at 4 in the morning and resoling her shoes because she could not afford new ones, and that he was an old man in a bed who could not fix any of it himself, and that he was asking Curtis, as the boy he had taught, to make sure that for once in this world the right person did not get walked past. Curtis came to the hospital the following week. Renee did not know he was coming. She was on her round near the end, and she came into bed 9 to find the old man sitting up and a tall man in a good coat standing by the window with a paper crane in his hand, one of hers, turning it over the exact way the girl in bed 4 once had. The man looked up when she came in. He looked at her for a moment like he was checking her against a description. Then he set the crane down very gently and he told her his name, and he told her that he had been looking for her for a week, and that the man in the bed had not stopped talking about her, and that he ran a foundation she had never heard of, and that he would very much like an hour of her time whenever her shift allowed. Renee, who had spent her whole adult life being told what she owed, and almost never what she was owed, did not know how to stand inside that sentence. She said she was working. She said it like a reflex. Curtis smiled and said he knew, and that he would wait, and that he would buy her breakfast at 7 when she clocked out, and that it would be the easiest hour of work she had ever done. They sat in the hospital cafeteria at 7 in the morning, Renee in her scrubs with her hands smelling of cleaning spray, and Curtis in his good coat with a folder he did not open right away. He bought her the breakfast he had promised, eggs and toast and the bad coffee, and he did not rush her. He asked her to tell him about the girl in bed, 4. So she did. She told him about Imani and the Dr. Crane who wanted to go to the beach, and the row of 19 along the rail, and the empty bed on the 20th night. She told it plainly, the way she had told Walter. And Curtis stirred his coffee and did not interrupt and did not look away when her voice went thin at the end of it. And he asked her about the Cranes, all of them the whole year, and she told him that too, the flyer from the break room and the cracked phone, and the kitchen table at 6 in the morning, and somewhere in the telling she stopped being careful and just talked. About Aviana, who stepped across town and was outgrowing everything faster than the money came. About the shoes she had resolved twice. About the bus that did not run in the ice, and the supervisor who counted rooms and the closet she knew better than her own life. And Curtis listened to all of it the way the old man had listened, like none of it was small, his coffee going cold in front of him. Then he opened the folder. He told her that the Foundation ran teaching programs in 46 hospitals and that they had been trying for 2 years to find people to run the ward programs, real people, not contractors, people who understood that the folding was never about the folding. He tells her they paid a salary, a real one, with health insurance and a retirement account, and the kind of number that does not leave a person doing arithmetic on a cold bus. He told her there was a training program, and that the man in bed 9 had already said he would oversee her first 6 months himself if the hospital would let him stay. Near enough to do it. He told her the position was hers if she wanted it, that she would be paid to do. In the daylight with children who needed it, the exact thing she had been doing for free in the dark for a year. Renee put her hand over her mouth and she did not say anything for a long time. She thought about the supervisor who counted rooms. She thought about the $40 that was the gas bill. She thought about Aviana asleep across town, and the shoes, and the brake light, and 341 nights of leaving a small, bright thing on a sill where a frightened person would find it and know that someone had been there in the dark. She thought she might be dreaming. She asked him when she could talk, why? Why her? Why? Now Curtis told her the truth. He said that a long time ago a man with $11 and a suitcase had taught a 6-year-old with nothing much at home that his hands could make something out of nothing, and that everything Curtis had, every dollar of the foundation, every program in every ward came from that one unwitnessed kindness in a basement, and that he had spent his whole life looking for chances to pay a debt he could never finish paying. He said that the man in bed 9 had asked him for exactly one thing in 40 years, and that this was it. He said it was not charity. He said it was a ledger finally balancing. Renee took the job. The old man stayed at Mercy General longer than his chart had promised, which surprised the doctors and did not surprise Tasha at all. He oversaw Renee's first weeks himself. From the chair by the window, his hands too unsteady to fold, but his voice steady enough to teach. She would bring children up from the ward in wheelchairs, and they would sit in a loose ring around bed 9, and the old man would talk their hands through the crane. Always the crane first, because the crane is patient and forgiving and teaches the hands to trust a process they cannot yet see the end of. And Renee would kneel among them with her quick, strong hands and finish the creases his could not. And the room that had been the quietest on the floor became the one the nurses found reasons to walk past slowly. He lived to see the spring. The doctors did not have a clean word for it. His leg did not get better. The thing in his chart did not reverse itself. He had a reason to be in the room now, though, and a reason turns out to be its own kind of medicine, and he held on through the winter and into the first warm week of April, with a stubbornness the staff had stopped trying to explain. He taught nearly every shift Renee worked. He learned the children's names and remembered them, which child liked the bright paper, and which one wanted only blue, which one needed to be told 3 times that a crooked fold was not a failure. He told them what he had told 40 years of children, that a person who could fold a crane could fold a life. And the children believed him because he was old and certain, and his voice was kind, and Renee, kneeling among them finishing the creases his hands could not, believed him too. He died on a Tuesday morning in April in his sleep, with a row of paper cranes on the windowsill where the morning light found them. Renee was the one who found him because she had come in early to show him a lily she had finally learned to make hold on the first try. She stood in the doorway with the lily in her hand and nowhere to put it, the way she had once stood in the doorway of an empty bed full a year before, and the morning was very quiet and the cranes on the sill were lit up gold along their wings. She did not call the nurse right away. She crossed the room and set the lily on the sill beside the cranes, and she sat down in the chair. She had pulled to that bed 100 times, and she sat with him a while, in the grey hour, before the floor woke up. Then she folded one more crane, slow and careful and perfectly square, the best one her hands had ever made, and she set it in his still hands and closed them gently around it. And only then did she go to the desk and tell Tasha, who had also somehow known, the way she had known about all of it, before anyone said a word. The foundation buried him under his own name, the one he had been too modest to look at, and the church basement where it had all started was full to the doors. Renee runs the ward program at Mercy General now and at 2 more hospitals across the city, and she trains the people who run the others. Aviana is 12 and has new shoes and folds, cranes faster than her mother. There is a small brass plaque outside the children's wing that Renee did not ask for and could not talk them out of, and it does not have her name on it because she would not allow that, but it has a single paper crane stamped into the metal, and underneath it the only words she agreed to, which are that someone was here in the dark and thought of you. She still folds one for every patient, every night she works on every sill. She never signs them, she does not need to anymore. The whole hospital knows whose hands they are. And on the windowsill of her own small apartment, on the kitchen table where she once sat at 6 in the morning, learning a shape off a cracked phone, there is a single crooked crane she has kept for a long time, the first one she ever made hold, a little crushed on one wing. Aviana has asked her more than once why she keeps that ugly one when she can fold a perfect one in under a minute now, and Renee always says the same thing, that the ugly one is the one that taught her that a thing does not have to come out perfect to be the thing that changes everything. And Aviana rolls her eyes the way 12-year-olds do, and keeps it dusted anyway. Renee does not fold 1,000 and make a wish. She never did. She just folds the next one, and the one after that, the way an old man taught her a process trusts its own end. And some mornings, setting a fresh bird on a stranger's sill, she thinks of the 2 people who taught her that a small bright thing left in the dark is never ever wasted. The girl who asked if she knew how to make anything out of paper, and the man who, at the very end of a long life of teaching, was taught one more time by a stranger's tired hands that the thing he had given away had been coming back to him all along. If someone once left a small kindness on your windowsill when you were too frightened to ask for it, I hope you tell them in the comments tonight while you still can. And if this story stayed with you, there is another one waiting, about a man who swept the same train platform for 19 years before the city learned his name.